Do you want to learn how to draw ultra shiny, glowy, see-through things like this? It's actually really easy if you know a few tips and tricks. The technique I'm going to show you works really well on spherical objects like fruits, desserts, or droplets of water. But I'm hoping that once this video is over, you'll be able to use it on any object you can think of. So let's get started. For the purposes of demonstrating the technique, I'll be doing 2 real-time paintings. A simple one to start out, then a more complex painting after we've covered the basics. All right, here we go. So this is an example that I'm going to be using to demonstrate how to make something look shiny, jelly, see-through. I'm going to use this paw pad, could be kitty or puppy, and I'm going to start by picking a base color. I'm doing more of a fantastical version, so I'm going to do mine sort of Baja Blast Seafoam Green. So I'm choosing this color that's right between green and blue, and relatively bright, but not all the way into neon territory because we're gonna need to add some contrast later. So let's pull it to something around here. I'm gonna set my line art to be a reference layer, and I'm gonna add a new blank layer, and I can just drag and drop to fill in those lines. That's a little handy Procreate trick for you. So now we have our base layer. So what's next? We need to add highlights, the beautiful glow color, and then shadows. So let's start with the shadows. For shadows, I love to do cool shadows and warm highlights, but you can also do that switched if you want. So for me, I like going sort of into that cooler territory towards the blue, and then moving it down a little bit because it's a shadow. And we can start painting our shadows in. Maybe something along those lines. Yeah, I like that a lot better. So some of it is a process of just elimination, figuring out what works. I'm just painting in my shadows like this. Beautiful. You can do this on a separate layer if you want, but mine is on the same layer. Doesn't really matter to me. And I'm gonna just move my brush up a little bit. Make it a bit bigger. I like my shadows to be about that big. There we go, perfect. Okay, so we've got our shadows in. Now we need to add sort of the glowy effect. I also want to make sure I'm locking this layer using alpha lock so that we're not drawing outside the lines. So now, this is more of a glow or a highlight, so I'm gonna move from the base color. Since the shadows were cool, we want the highlights to be warm, so I'm moving it closer to yellow. I'm gonna bring it more into this vibrant neon territory. And I can start brushing that in. Ooh, that looks pretty cool. And you can experiment with this. This one makes it look really glowy. I love the contrast of it, having the highlight be so vibrant. That's why we didn't choose the base color to already be in this territory. We could even go more yellow with it if we wanted to, just for some contrast. And then just brushing in those little highlights like that. Or what you could do is have more of the green glow that we had before, and then even a smaller rim at the bottom for yellow, sort of creating a gradient. You can do this with an airbrush, or you can do this with regular brush. I'm just using a regular one right now. And this is just a fun idea I thought might be cool. Because we're going for a Baja Blast effect, I might even add a little bit of extra blue on the top just for some color variation, because I think it looks really cool. That's just me experimenting. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But I thought it would make a cool gradient like that. Looks pretty good. Okay, so next we have to add the actual highlight, meaning like a reflected white light that we're adding on top of this. This is more of the glow, something that makes it look really nice. I wouldn't necessarily call these highlights, but let's add on a highlight. So I'm gonna go full white, and the key to making something look really shiny is to have a harsh line on your highlight and make it relatively small. What I mean by that is we're doing something along these lines, adding it in like that. And I will give you an example of what it would look like alternatively. So if we were to do, for example, I'm gonna choose a airbrush, and I'm gonna add my highlight with the airbrush like this. It does look kind of shiny because light is reflecting off of it, but this isn't exactly the look I'm going for. It looks too rough. It doesn't look super reflective. Kind of looks like if you were to look into the pop pad, you wouldn't really be able to see your own reflection. So I'm doing it a different way. We'll go back to our other brush and make it really small. I like having these highlights be tiny. And I kind of like putting them between the shadow and the base color on that like Terminator line, but that's just my preference. And for each of these pop pads, I'm having them come from the same direction. The top left, you can put that wherever your light source is coming from, but keep it consistent between the different forms. I think that's the main key here. This already is looking fantastic. I love it. You could go in and add some more details if you want, make some extra little sparkles. You could add more, you know, tiny highlights in there. You can get a little bit random with it. You could add, you know, some highlights in the glowing areas if you wanted to. This is the part that gets really fun because you can experiment and add different things. You could add more like dark shadows if you wanted to. You know, get in there and really just mess it up. Have fun. Something like that could look really cool. So yeah, I think this is just a really fun technique to do. And these are the tips that I use to get it to look really good. You can add some rim lights. You can do whatever you want in here. I actually really like that rim light. We're gonna add that in. Look at that. All right, so here is our jelly paw. This was a pretty easy tutorial. But if you want to get crazier with it, I will show you that in the next tutorial in a couple seconds. I'll give you some more tips and tricks to get this look. Okay, so we finished the first example and now we're ready for the big leagues. I'm gonna go over a lot more tips and tricks using this beautiful image I found on Google Images of a glass apple. So we're gonna use this apple. I'm gonna render it for you in real time because I want to prove that it's not about the detail that you add to it or the amount of time you spend on it. You can get a really great looking result in a very small amount of time. So I'm gonna show you in real time, and I'm gonna start by just blocking out the shape of our apple. I will let you know that I don't actually color pick from Procreate. So if I'm choosing a color, I'm doing it just by eye. And I do that for two reasons. One reason is that Procreate, for whatever reason, I'm using it as a reference in the canvas. If I color pick from this reference, you can see that it does pick the color, but it is not nearly as vibrant as it is in the reference. You can see side to side how that looks. And for two, I find that you can actually secretly kind of trick yourself into learning about color theory just by picking colors by looking at them instead of by color picking them. So I'm going to be picking a base color for the apple. I'm just going to go with a general like middle red to start with, and I'm just going to use the freehand selection tool to create the shape of our apple. So I'm just kind of going in a general apple shape, something like that. And of course we can't forget the stem, like that. Sure, that looks good to me. Fill out the bottom a little bit. Perfect. So now I'm gonna lock this layer by using the alpha lock feature, and then we won't be drawing outside the lines. So let's start by adding in some of these shadows. I'm seeing that they're very dark, getting to almost black territory. So we could pick a really dark red color for this, and I'm gonna increase my brush size by quite a lot. By the way, the brush that I'm using for this example is the Nicorel brush. This is a base Procreate brush. It's just in the painting section. So if you have Procreate, you already have Nicorel. You don't need to be going and buying extra fancy brushes, although I know that can be fun too. So let me start by just blocking in some of these shadows. We're being really loose with it, really basic. Just kind of start adding these in here. I love just being a little chaotic with it. This just trains me to be less of a perfectionist when it comes to art. I can make art faster, which is something that I really appreciate. So we're going in, we're just adding some of these shadows. A lot of these have completely overtaken everything, so I will add some of the base back in. You can color pick from your own drawing if you want, as much as you want. And I'll add a little bit to the stem here too. Okay, so now here comes one of my favorite parts, which is adding that glow layer that I talked about before. That's this super vibrant neon red color. Let's go back to red. I'm just gonna boost it all the way up because that's what I'm seeing in the image. It is cranked up to 1,000,000, and that's what gives this like really bright, vibrant contrast. So we can start adding that in here. And I just love the way this looks. It's a little bit of it there too. You can add it to the corners. I'm going pretty quick. I'm just trying to be really loose with it so that it doesn't take too long. And you can increase and decrease your brush size as you see fit, and just adding in some of these little tiny details in here, however you want. I love the way glass tends to capture all these like super tiny little particles. I think it looks really good. So I like adding that in my own pieces as well. Okay, so we've got a pretty good base going. We've got the base color, we've got our highlight color, we've got our shadows in here. I might even go in and add more of this. There's like sort of a burgundy color here. Might add some of that in just for fun. That might have made a better base color to begin with, but that's okay. It's all about the learning process. Okay, this is looking really good to me. Our drawing doesn't look like glass yet, and we're gonna change that here. So let's add in some of the highlights now. So I'm gonna take the brush all the way to white. I'm gonna crank it all the way down, or pretty close to all the way down. I want to start by adding in some of these little dappled effects here. So you can kind of add these in as you see fit. Some of them are really small. You can vary the size of your brush. Some of them are really small, some of them are bigger. You don't have to also exactly follow the photo. I almost tend to follow photos too much. Even though I'm being really loose with it, I get caught up in some of the details. Like I might be like, oh, well, there's a circle here, I want to add that in. But if you want to go really fast and get it done, you don't have to be that detailed with it. So I just added in some of those little speckles. Let's see where else we're seeing some highlights in the apple. So I see some here. This is a really beautiful kind of glowy highlight. Looks like it's on fire almost. That's beautiful. I'm seeing some over here. These ones are a bit softer. So we can add it in kind of like this, just using a soft touch on my brush. And then for the one on the right, I'll increase the size a bit, and I'll start really harsh, and then I'll sort of just lighten my touch just to fade it in like that. It's starting to look really good. And then I am seeing some rim light here. We can add those in just really lightly, touching on that rim light like that. Looks good. And then, of course, there is this top reflection on the apple. Because this is such a harsh line, I'm actually going to do the same thing we did to create the base of the apple, just by using the freehand tool. And I have the color fill option selected, so whenever I create a shape and then close it, it will just fill that shape in with color. So let's add in the top of this apple right here. Adding it in like that. You can do multiple shapes. I know it goes behind the stem, so I'm trying to figure out how to add it like that. Oops. I guess I undid that. All right, let's do it again. So we can go behind here. There's a bit of a circle here. Go back around and then close that shape up like that. So already this looks pretty good. We're almost done. I think one of the biggest things you can do to add that final touch that make it really look like glass or a see-through object is adding in the shadow. So we're gonna do that now. I'm gonna pick that really dark red color, and I'll make a new layer and I'll put it underneath our apple. And I'm gonna move my brush up a bit so we can start painting in the shadow. And I'm just being super loosey-goosey with it. I think the shadow is one of the most important steps for a see-through object, just because the way that the light reflects through the object and casts it down through the shadow is what makes it it sells the illusion that it's see-through. And as you can see in our reference, we're seeing some of that super bright color coming through in the shadow, so we're adding that in. And you can be lighter with your brush to add it less, and then you can also choose different colors to add in. So something like that for the outer rim. It's looking really, really good. Wow. I love the way that looks. I'm gonna add a couple of finishing touches back to the apple. And this is completely disregarding the photo at this point. I just wanted to add in like maybe some little kind of whimsical highlights like this, or make it look sparkly or beautiful. You can add as many in as you want. You know, just little touches here and there. You could add little circles or squares or even different colors, but I think for what we're going for, that is looking beautiful. And yeah, that's how it's done. I'm gonna just touch it up a little bit, and then I will check in with you in just a second. And there she is. Here is our final apple. I think it turned out great, and it didn't take that long. You can see that, you know, looking at the photo looks a lot more realistic because it's a photo, but if you don't see the photo next to it, I think this looks amazing, and you can immediately get the impression right off the bat that this is glass, it's something that's see-through, it's sparkly, shiny, and all of that is just done using these abstract brush strokes. Like if we zoom in, you know, this doesn't really mean anything, but I love the way that it comes together to create the optical illusion that it's see-through. Okay, so what did we learn today? Here's a recap of the key concepts. 1. Use high contrast colors. Pick a more muted base color, and then you can add deep shadows and vibrant accent colors to boost the contrast. 2. The highlights should be harsh and small. That's what makes the object look like polished glass. And 3. Include a cast shadow with highlights peeking through to enhance the glass effect. Alright, that's the end of this tutorial, and I hope you learned something new. I'm going to continue making fun art-related videos, so if that's your thing, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next one.